The sun hung like a brass coin in the bleached sky, baking the earth until it cracked like old leather. Jack Callahan squinted against the glare as he led his herd down the main street of Drywater, Arizona territory. The cattle kicked up clouds of red dust that coated everything as worn chaps. His horse's flanks, the bandana wrapped tight around his nose and mouth. Folks called him Dust for a reason, though he reckoned it had more to do with the miles he'd traveled than any particular fondness for the stuff. Drywater barely earned its name as a town. A handful of wood-frame buildings lined the rutted street, May Delaney's Blue Lark Saloon, a general store with boards missing from its facade, a makeshift railway depot that looked ready to blow away in the next sandstorm. The Southern Pacific had punched through 6 months back, bringing with it the promise of prosperity that hadn't quite materialized yet. Instead, it brought Silas Pike. Jack's gaze settled on the water station, a series of wooden tanks surrounded by armed men in dusters despite the heat. Pike's men. Each tank bore a fresh padlock the size of a man's fist, and a painted sign that read "Water by permission only, S. Pike Enterprises." His horse, a bay mare named Sage, snorted and tossed her head. She smelled water but knew better than to expect any. Jack patted her neck. "Easy, girl. We'll figure something out." One of Pike's men, a scarred fellow with tobacco juice staining his gray beard, ambled over. "That's quite a herd you got there. Cowboy, looks mighty thirsty." "Been on the trail 2 weeks," Jack said, keeping his voice level. "Just need enough to get them to the stockyards in Tucson." "Well now, that's gonna cost you." The man spat a brown stream into the dust. "Mister, Pike's rates are $5 a head for cattle, 2 for horses." Jack's jaw tightened. Highway robbery, plain and simple. Those rates would eat his entire profit margin. "Last time I came through, it was 50 cents a head." "Last time, mister, Pike didn't own exclusive water rights for 50 miles in any direction." The guard's hand drifted to his holstered Colt. "You want water or not?" From across the street came the sound of children reciting their letters. Jack turned to see a woman in a simple cotton dress standing before a makeshift classroom on the church's covered porch. She held a small slate board in one hand and a kerosene lantern in the other, though the sun still blazed overhead. Her dark hair was pinned up, revealing the graceful line of her neck as she bent to help a young boy with his writing. Elena Morales didn't look up, but Jack sensed she was aware of the confrontation at the water station. Her students, a mix of Mexican, Chinese, and native children whose parents worked the railroad, continued their lesson, though some kept glancing nervously at Pike's men. The scarred guard followed Jack's gaze. "Pretty little thing. Ain't she that Mexican widow? Course, her husband wasn't much better than a thief. Way, mister. Pike tells it." Before Jack could respond, a boy of maybe 8 years stumbled and fell in the dust. The other children gasped as he lay still, his lips cracked and bleeding. Elena dropped her slate and rushed to him, cradling his head in her lap. "Water," she said, looking directly at the guards. "This child needs water." The scarred man shrugged. $5. For a cup of water for a child. Elena's voice carried the kind of controlled fury Jack recognized from battlefield sergeants about to order a charge. "Rules are rules, senora." Jack had survived the war by knowing when to fight and when to walk away. He'd built a reputation as a man who minded his own business, who delivered cattle on time without asking questions. But the sight of that boy's parched lips, the way Elena's hands trembled as she tried to shade him from the sun, something shifted in his chest like a rusty gate opening. "Put it on my bill," Jack said quietly. The guard grinned. "Well now, that's mighty charitable. But seeing as you ain't paid for your herd yet." A sudden explosion rocked the depot. Orange flames erupted from one of the freight cars on the siding, sending a column of black smoke into the sky. Men shouted and ran in all directions. The church bell clanged in alarm. In the chaos, Jack saw Elena slip away from the crowd gathering around the fire. She moved with purpose toward the depot office, glancing back only once. Her eyes met Jack's for a heartbeat before she disappeared inside. The scarred guard cursed and ran toward the fire, leaving the water station momentarily unguarded. Jack didn't hesitate. He whistled sharp and low, bringing his lead riders Tom and Miguel to his side. "Get the herd to that well behind the church," he ordered, "quick and quiet." While his men moved the cattle, Jack grabbed 2 buckets and worked the pump handle. The mechanism was stiff from disuse, but eventually water gushed forth, brown at first, then clearer. He filled both buckets and jogged to where Elena knelt with the unconscious boy. Here, he handed her 1 bucket and a clean bandana from his pocket. She took them without a word, her fingers brushing his. They were covered in chalk dust and ink stains, but steady as she dampened the cloth and pressed it to the boy's forehead. The child's eyelids fluttered. "Gabriel," Elena murmured. "Drink slowly, mijo." While she tended to the boy, Jack distributed water among the other children using his hat as a makeshift cup. They drank gratefully, their teacher forgotten momentarily in their relief. From the depot came more shouts. Through the smoke, Jack glimpsed a figure emerge from the office. Elena, he realized with surprise. She moved swiftly but without panic. Something clutched against her chest. As she passed the burning freight car, another figure appeared in the smoke. Deacon Hale, Pike's enforcer, even at this distance. Jack could see the silver glint of Hale's federal badge, though everyone knew it was about as legitimate as a $3 bill. Hale seemed to be searching for something or someone. As he turned, something fell from his pocket. In the orange light of the flames, it glittered like a small star before disappearing into the dust. Elena reached the church just as the fire brigade, such as it was in Drywater, began forming a bucket line. She slipped inside, and moments later emerged empty-handed, her face composed as she returned to her students. "Mrs. Morales," one of the Mexican women called out. "What happened? Was anyone hurt?" "Just an accident, I'm sure," Elena replied, though Jack caught the tightness around her eyes. "Children, I think we've had enough excitement for today. Let's continue our lesson tomorrow." As the children dispersed, Gabriel leaning on 2 older boys, Elena began gathering her teaching supplies. Jack approached, leading sage. "That was a brave thing you did," he said, though he wasn't sure if he meant standing up to the guards or whatever she'd done in the depot. She looked up at him, and in the late afternoon light, he could see flecks of gold in her brown eyes. "So was what you did, though it might cost you." "Already has." Jack nodded toward the water station where the guards were returning to their posts, faces grim. "They'll make me pay double now, if they let me water at all." "Then why did you do it?" The question hung between them like dust motes in a shaft of sunlight. Jack considered his words carefully. In his experience, the truth was often simpler than any lie. "Been a long time since I did something just because it was right," he said finally. "Felt overdue." A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "Elena Morales." She extended her hand like a man would, direct and sure. "Jack Callahan." Her grip was firm, calloused from chalk and hard work. "Most folks call me Dust." "Is that what you prefer?" "Jack's fine." From the depot, Hale's voice rose above the commotion. "Barking orders." Elena's expression shuddered like windows before a storm. "You should go," she said, "before they decide you had something to do with the fire." "What about you?" "I'm just a school teacher." She clutched her books tighter. "What could they want with me?" Jack heard what she didn't say, that being Mexican, widowed and educated, made her suspect enough in a town like Drywater. He'd seen how the war had changed people, made them see enemies in every shadow. The territories were worse, where law bent like heat mirages and justice was whatever men like Pike said it was. His herd had found the well and were drinking their fill under Tom and Miguel's watchful eyes. Soon enough, someone would notice and there'd be hell to pay. But for now, the immediate crisis had passed. "If you need anything," Jack said, then stopped. What could he offer? He was just a drover passing through, a man with dust in his lungs and ghosts in his dreams. Elena seemed to understand. "Thank you, Jack, for the water, for—" She gestured toward the depot where the fire was finally under control. "For not asking questions." As she walked away, Jack noticed she kept one hand pressed to her side where something rectangular bulged beneath her dress. Whatever she'd taken from that office, she'd risked her life for it. And from the way Hale was now stalking through the crowd, examining every face, Jack figured it wouldn't be long before he came looking. The sun sank lower, painting Drywater's shabby buildings in shades of gold and rust. Jack's cattle were watered, his duty to them fulfilled. Smart thing would be to push on. Make camp outside town, continue to Tucson at first light, mind his own business like always. Instead, he found himself leading Sage to the livery stable. Staying the night, Isaiah Brooks looked up from his forge, sweat gleaming on his dark skin. The former sergeant wore his cavalry suspenders over a leather apron, hammer still in hand. "Thought you'd be pushing through." Change of plans. Jack unsaddled Sage, noting the way Brooks favored his left leg a memento from the same battlefield where they'd first met. "You still make the best shoes in the territory." Best shoes, worst small talk. Brooks set down his hammer. This about the fire, or the Mexican teacher who's got Hale sniffing around like a bloodhound? Maybe both. Jack hung his tack on the designated peg. "What's her story?" Brooks considered him with eyes that had seen too much. "Elena Morales. Husband worked accounts for the railroad until he died 3 months back. Pike said he was skimming, but couldn't prove nothing. She stayed on, teaching the workers' children for pennies and prayers. And Hale shows up right after the husband dies. Convenient. Wouldn't you say?" Brooks tested the edge of a horseshoe with his thumb. "You planning on getting involved? Dust, because that ain't like you." Jack thought about the boy collapsed in the street, about water locked away while children went thirsty, about a woman brave enough to walk into a burning building for reasons he didn't understand, but somehow respected. "Maybe it's time it was," he said. Brooks studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "May's serving beef stew tonight. Real beef, not the mystery meat she usually claims is rabbit. Might be a good place to hear what folks are saying about that fire." The Blue Lark Saloon squatted on the corner like a fat toad, its painted sign creaking in the evening breeze. Jack pushed through the bat-wing doors into a haze of tobacco smoke and whiskey fumes. The place was packed with railroad workers, cowboys, and the usual collection of drifters and dreamers that washed up in towns like Drywater. May Delaney presided over it all from behind the bar, her gray-streaked hair piled high and her sharp eyes missing nothing. She nodded when she saw Jack. "Dust Callahan, heard you watered your herd from the church well." She poured him a whiskey without asking. "That took sand. Just tired of playing by rules that don't make sense." Jack accepted the glass but didn't drink. He needed his wits about him. "What caused the fire?" "Official word, lamp knocked over in the freight car." May's expression said what she thought of official words. "Course, that particular car happened to be full of Pike's private shipments, and now there's talk of missing documents from the depot office?" Before Jack could respond, the doors swung open. Deacon Hale entered, his pale eyes scanning the room like a hawk's. He wore his guns low, tied down gunfighter style, though Jack wondered when he'd last faced anyone in a fair fight. The saloon quieted as Hale approached the bar. Up close, Jack could see the man's clothes were singed, his face streaked with soot except where sweat had carved clean channels. "Evening, May." Hale's voice was soft, cultured, the kind that made folk nervous because it didn't match the violence in his eyes. "I'm looking for someone who might have been near the depot during the fire. Mexican woman, about yay high." He held his hand at shoulder height. "School teacher." "Lots of folks were near the depot," May said evenly. "Fire tends to draw a crowd." Hale's smile was thin as paper. This particular woman was seen entering the office just before important documents went missing. Mr. Pike is concerned. Can't help you. May wiped down the bar with practiced strokes. I was here, serving drinks to thirsty customers. Speaking of which, you buying or just browsing? The threat in Hale's eyes was clear, but May had been standing down dangerous men since before the war. After a moment, Hale turned to scan the room again. His gaze lingered on Jack. You're the drover who watered his herd without permission. It wasn't a question. Jack met his stare steadily. Paid for water, just not at those rates. Mr. Pike sets the rates. You don't like them. You can take your beef elsewhere. Planning to first light. They stood that way for a heartbeat. Two men taking each other's measure. Jack had faced plenty of killers in his time, men who enjoyed it, men who did it for pay, men who killed because they didn't know what else to do. Hale was all three. Finally. Hale touched the brim of his hat. First light, then. Be sure you keep to it. After he left, the saloon exhaled collectively. Conversations resumed in hushed tones. May poured Jack another whiskey. Free advice, she said quietly. That man's killed more people than cholera. Don't give him a reason to add you to the list. Jack finally took a sip of whiskey, feeling it burn down his throat. Through the saloon's grimy window, he could see the church across the street, a lamp burning in the rear window where the living quarters were. Elena Morales was probably there now, tucking away whatever she'd risked her life to steal. No, not steal, rescue! Jack was certain of that much. He thought about Hale's eyes, cold as winter creek water, about Pike's stranglehold on the town's water, about children fainting from thirst while men got rich selling what God meant to be free. May, he said quietly, that beef stew still available? She smiled, the expression taking years off her face. For you, dust always. Might even throw in some cornbread if you're planning what I think you're planning. Jack didn't answer, but he didn't need to. In a town like Drywater, plans had a way of announcing themselves. Outside, the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. Somewhere in the desert, coyotes began their evening song, and in a small room behind a church, a woman sat with a secret that might change everything. While a man who'd forgotten what it felt like to care about anything discovered he still could. Elena's fingers trembled as she turned another page of the ledger by lamplight. The small room behind the church was sparse, a narrow bed, a washstand, a table scarred by years of use. But it was hers, a sanctuary where even Pike's influence struggled to reach. The ledger told a story in neat columns of numbers and dates. Her husband Manuel had been meticulous, recording every transaction, every payment, every discrepancy. The final entries, made just days before his death, detailed payments for security services that coincided with attacks on native water sources. One name appeared repeatedly in the margins D. Hale. A soft knock startled her. Elena quickly wrapped the ledger in oilcloth and slid it beneath a loose floorboard. Who is it? May Delaney. Honey, brought you some supper. Elena opened the door to find the saloon keeper holding a covered pot that smelled of beef and onions. May's eyes were kind but knowing. Figured you might have missed dinner with all the excitement, May said, bustling inside. That was quite a thing you did today. I don't know what you mean. Elena accepted the pot gratefully. She hadn't eaten since morning. Course you don't. May settled into the room's only other chair. Just like I don't know why Deacon Hale's been asking about you all over town. That man's got the instincts of a rattler. Elena ladled stew into a bowl, her appetite suddenly gone. He thinks I took something from the depot. Did you? The question hung between them. May had been kind to Elena since Manuel's death, one of the few who didn't whisper behind raised hands. But trust was a luxury she couldn't afford. Manuel was a good man. Elena said finally. He died trying to do what was right. I won't let them turn him into a thief. May nodded slowly. That cowboy who helped you today, Jack Callahan, He's got a reputation for minding his own business. Then why didn't he? That's what I'm wondering. May stood to leave. You be careful, honey. Men like Pike don't forgive, and men like Hale don't forget. After May left, Elena retrieved the ledger and studied it again. The evidence was damning, but evidence meant nothing without someone willing to listen. The territorial judge was in Pike's pocket. The federal marshal came through maybe twice a year. She needed witnesses, people brave enough to stand up and speak truth. She thought of Jack Callahan's steady gaze, the way he'd acted without hesitation when Gabriel collapsed. Cowboys were practical men, not given to heroics without reason, yet he'd risked Pike's anger for a child he didn't know. Morning brought trouble, as Elena knew it would. She was setting up for the day's lessons when Hale appeared. Flanked by two of Pike's men, the children scattered like quail, leaving Elena alone on the church porch. Mrs. Morales. Hale touched his hat brim in mock courtesy. By order of Mr. Pike, acting in his capacity as water commissioner. These premises need to be searched. The church is not Mr. Pike's property. Elena kept her voice level, though her heart hammered. No, but you are suspected of theft. Railroad property went missing during yesterday's fire. Hale's pale eyes never left her face. We can do this easy or hard. Before Elena could respond, the sound of hooves announced a new arrival. Jack Callahan rode up on his bay mare, leading a pack horse loaded with water barrels. He dismounted with unhurried precision. Morning, he said pleasantly. Just bringing some water for the children. Figured they might be thirsty. Hale's hand drifted to his gun. This doesn't concern you, Drover. Water concerns everybody in Drywater. Jack lifted one of the barrels, muscles straining under his shirt. Mrs. Morales, where would you like this? The tension stretched taut as wire. Elena saw Hale calculating 3 of them against 1 cowboy. But Jack had positioned himself where he could reach his rifle in its saddle scabbard. More importantly, people were gathering. Isaiah Brooks stood in his smithy doorway, hammer in hand. Doc Lee Wen emerged from his herb shop. Even some railroad workers paused on their way to the morning shift. Witnesses, the one thing Hale couldn't afford. Search warrant, Jack asked mildly. Still holding the water barrel, Hale's jaw tightened. Don't need one. Territorial law gives Mr. Pike broad authority. To investigate water theft, sure, but Mrs. Morales here teaches letters, not irrigation. Jack set down the barrel and straightened. Unless you're saying education's a crime now. A few chuckles from the gathered crowd. Hale's face darkened. You're pushing your luck, cowboy. Story of my life. Jack's hand rested casual-like on his belt, inches from his Colt. But I'll tell you what, I've been inside that church plenty of times. Even helped Father O'Rourke fix the roof last spring. If you're looking for stolen goods, I can save you the trouble. Nothing in there but Bibles, prayer books, and maybe some chalk. It was a lie, of course. Eliana had never seen Jack before yesterday. But he sold it with such easy confidence that even she almost believed it. Hale studied them both, that cold intelligence working behind his eyes. Finally. He smiled, a predator recognizing another predator. Another time, then. He turned to go, then paused. Oh, Mrs. Morales, you might want to be careful about the company you keep. Cowboys have a habit of moving on, leaving folks to face consequences alone. After they left, Elena's knees nearly buckled. Jack steadied her with a hand on her elbow, his touch careful and respectful. Thank you, she whispered. They'll be back. He helped her carry the water barrels inside. Whatever you took, they want it bad? Elena studied his weathered face, the small scar on his jaw, the way his eyes never stopped checking their surroundings. Why are you helping me? Jack was quiet for a long moment, stacking the barrels against the wall. You know what I did during the war? Cavalry scout. Spent 3 years finding water in places that didn't want to give it up. Learn to read the land, follow trails, keep men alive in country that wanted them dead. He turned to face her. After Appomattox, I figured I was done with causes. Just wanted to move cattle, make a living, stay out of trouble. Been doing that for 10 years, but yesterday, he shrugged. Maybe a man can only walk past so much wrong before he's got to stop walking. Elena felt something shift in her chest, a recognition, perhaps of a kindred spirit. It's dangerous. Pike owns this town. Pike owns water and fear. Take away one, the other follows. Jack moved to the window, checking the street. That ledger you're hiding, it's evidence of something. Elena's breath caught. He'd seen more than she'd realized. How did you... Way you kept touching your side yesterday? Shape of something under your dress. Plus, Hale's not the type to get worked up over nothing. Jack faced her again. I'm not asking to see it, but if you're planning to use it, you'll need help. And you're offering... I've got 1,600 head of cattle that need water. Pike's got me over a barrel there. But Isaiah Brooks is an old friend. Doc Lee is a good man. And May Delaney's got more sand than most men I've known. You're not as alone as you think. A child's laughter drifted from outside. Elena's students were returning, cautiously, like deer after hunters pass. She thought of Gabriel, of all the children whose parents broke their backs laying track for pennies while Pike grew fat on their thirst. My husband found evidence, she said quietly. Payments to destroy native water sources, bribes to federal inspectors, and something else plans to dynamite Skeleton Canyon's natural dam. Flood out the Mexican farmers downstream so Pike can buy their land cheap. Jack whistled low. That's enough to hang a man, if the law was honest. The law here wears Pike's brand. Elena moved to the loose floorboard, then hesitated. Trust was a leap of faith, and she'd already lost so much to misplaced trust. There's a federal judge in Prescott, Jack said. Samuel Morrison. We served together briefly. He's tough as nails and straight as they come. Get that evidence to him, along with witnesses. And Pike's finished. Prescott is 200 miles through Apache territory. I know the route. Jack's smile was grim. Like I said, I'm good at finding water in hostile country. Elena made her decision. She pried up the floorboard and retrieved the oilcloth bundle. Then we'd better start finding witnesses. The rest of the morning passed in careful planning. Elena taught her lessons while Jack worked on repairs around the church. His presence a deterrent to Pike's men. They spoke in snatches between classes, building a list of those who might testify, workers who'd lost family to accidents, ranchers forced out by water prices, native traders who'd seen their sacred springs dynamited. Fears kept them quiet, Elena said during the noon break. Pike's made examples of anyone who speaks out. Fears like a dam, Jack replied, replacing a broken board on the porch step. Looks solid till it finds a crack, then the whole thing gives way. That evening, they met at Isaiah Brooks's smithy. The former sergeant listened grimly as Elena showed him selected pages from the ledger. Always knew Pike was crooked, Brooks said. But this is murder, plain and simple. Them springs he destroyed were the only water for 3 native bands. Dozens died in the drought that followed. Will you testify? Elena asked. Brooks was quiet, working his bellows. The forge light painted shadows on his dark face. Got a sister in California. Been after me to visit. Might be time I took that trip. Elena's heart sank. She couldn't blame him. Pike had long arms. Isaiah, Jack said quietly. Remember Antietam, that cornfield? Every damn night. We held that ground. Against everything they threw at us, we held. Brooks snorted. This ain't the war. Dust, no cavalry coming over the hill, no generals moving pins on maps. Just us folks. And Pike's got all the ammunition. He's got water and money, Jack agreed. But we've got something else. Truth. And truth has a way of spreading like wildfire once it catches. Pretty words. Brooks plunged a horseshoe into his cooling bucket. Steam hissed up like anger. They gonna stop bullets? No, but they might make those bullets matter. Brooks studied them both, this unlikely pair, a Mexican widow and a dusty cowboy, planning to take on the most powerful man in the territory. Finally, he sighed. My sister can wait, but if I'm gonna risk my neck, we do this smart. No heroics, no grand gestures. We build our case quiet-like, get our people ready, then move all at once. Pike gets wind of this before we're ready. We're all dead. They shook on it, and Elena felt the first real spark of hope since Manuel's death. Over the next days, she and Jack worked to gather allies. It was delicate work, feeling out who might stand with them without tipping their hand. Jack had a gift for it. Sliding questions into casual conversation at the saloon, reading men like he read trails. Tom Brennan lost his ranch when Pike dammed Willow Creek. He reported one evening. He's working railroad security now. Hates every minute. He'll testify. The Washington family, too, Elena added. Their daughter took sick from bad water. Doc Lee saved her, but barely. Slowly, carefully, they built their coalition. But they weren't the only ones watching and planning. One night, Elena woke to the sound of breaking glass. A rock sailed through her window. A note tied around it, "Stop now or join your husband." She was still sweeping up glass when Jack arrived, having heard the commotion from his camp outside town. "Pack your things," he said. "You're not safe here." "I won't be driven out." Elena's hands were steady despite her racing heart. "That's what they want." "Then we change the game." Jack studied the note, his face hard. "May's got a room above the saloon, more people around. Harder for them to move without witnesses. And I'll be closer." The concern in his voice caught her off guard. In the weeks they'd been working together, she'd come to rely on his steady presence, his quiet competence. But this was something more. "Jack!" "I know." He met her eyes. "I know what you're thinking. Cowboy passing through, getting involved in something that's not his fight. But Elena..." He paused, choosing his words. "I've been passing through for 10 years. Maybe it's time I stopped." The air between them crackled with possibility. Elena felt her carefully maintained walls beginning to crack, like Isaiah's dam metaphor, but she couldn't afford to let them fall. Not yet. "Help me pack," she said softly. "And Jack, thank you." They worked in companionable silence, gathering her few possessions. The ledger went into a hidden pocket Elena had sewn into her traveling bag. As they prepared to leave, Jack noticed something glinting in the corner. "What's this?" He picked up a small silver earring. Its surface tarnished, but the design still visible, an eagle clutching arrows. Elena's breath caught. That's Manuel's. I gave them to him for our wedding." He always wore them. Both of them. "Yes, why?" She stopped, understanding flooding through her. "He was wearing them when he died. The undertaker returned them to me. Both of them." Jack turned the earring in the lamplight. "Then how did this one end up in your room unless it's not Manuel's?" Elena's voice was barely a whisper. "The killer. He took them, and dropped one when he threw the rock." Jack's expression was grim. "We need to be very careful who we show this to. But Elena, this is evidence, real physical evidence." For the first time since finding the ledger, Elena felt the full weight of what they were attempting. They weren't just challenging Pike's business empire. They were hunting a killer. And the killer knew it. The morning sky threatened violence. Clouds piling up like bruised fists over the red rock canyons. Winter appeared at the Blue Lark's back door just as Elena finished her breakfast, the Paiute girl moving silent as smoke. "Found what you seek," Winter said simply. Her English was careful but clear. "Old blast marks, broken wood from water wheels. The men who destroyed our springs left their marks in the stone." Jack looked up from cleaning his rifle. "How far?" Half-day's ride into the Canyonlands. Winta's dark eyes were serious beyond her 17 years. But storm coming. Bad one. Elena gathered her things quickly. They'd been waiting for this physical proof of the destroyed water sources mentioned in Manuel's ledger. We need to go before the rain washes away any evidence. Desert storms don't play games. Jack warned. We get caught in a box canyon during a flash flood. Then we'd better hurry. Elena was already wrapping the ledger in extra oilcloth. She'd taken to carrying it everywhere, unwilling to risk it being stolen. They assembled a small party: Jack, Elena, Winta, and Tom Brennan, the ex-rancher who'd agreed to help. Isaiah Brooks wanted to come, but his leg was acting up old war wounds and incoming weather didn't mix. Take this. Brooks handed Jack a canvas tarp. Military issue. Might save your hides if that storm catches you. They rode out under darkening skies, Winta leading on her paint pony. The girl knew the land like others knew their own faces, reading signs in broken twigs and shifted stones. Elena had never been this far from town, and the vastness of the landscape made her feel small as a seed. Stay close, Jack advised, riding beside her. Country like this can swallow people whole. The wind picked up as they entered the canyon system, carrying the metallic smell of rain. Red walls rose on either side, carved by ancient waters into fantastic shapes. Winta led them through a maze of interconnecting passages, each narrower than the last. There, she pointed to a section of canyon wall. Even from a distance, Elena could see the unnatural scars, blast marks radiating like dark stars. And below them, the remnants of wooden structures. Damn, Tom breathed. I helped build that water wheel 20 years ago. Native folks and settlers working together, sharing the springs fair and square. Pike destroyed it all in one night. They dismounted to examine the evidence more closely. Jack sketched the scene in a small notebook while Elena collected fragments of dynamited rock. The broken wood still showed char marks from the explosions. This matches the dates in the ledger, Elena said. August 15th, payment to D. Hale for removal services. 2 days later, 3 native families were found dead from thirst. Thunder rumbled overhead. Closer now, the first fat raindrops splattered on the rocks. We need to go, Winta said urgently. This canyon floods. Water comes like stampeding horses. They packed their evidence quickly. But as they prepared to mount, Tom's horse reared, whinnying in fear. Around the bend came 3 riders, moving fast. Deacon Hale led them, his pale duster flapping like buzzard wings. Well, well, Hale said, reining up hard. Quite the gathering. Sightseeing. Are we? Jack's hand moved to his gun, but Hale's men already had their rifles out. The canyon walls made escape impossible. Just showing misses. Morales, some local history, Jack said evenly. No law against that. Depends on the history. Hale's eyes fixed on Elena's saddlebags. What you got there? Schoolmarm, more stolen property. The rain intensified, turning from drops to sheets. Thunder crashed directly overhead. Elena felt the first trickle of water running down the canyon floor, just a rivulet now, but Winta's eyes were wide with fear. We need to get to high ground, the girl said. Now. Hale laughed. Nobody's going anywhere until... His words were drowned by a sound like nothing Elena had ever heard, a roaring, grinding chaos approaching fast. Up canyon, a wall of brown water appeared, carrying entire trees like matchsticks. Flood, Jack shouted. Ride! Chaos erupted. Horses screamed and plunged as riders fought to escape the narrow canyon. There was no time for confrontation now, only survival. Jack grabbed Elena's reins, pulling her horse along as they galloped desperately for higher ground. The water struck like a liquid battering ram. Tom's horse went down, and the man disappeared into the churning foam. One of Hale's riders suffered the same fate, his scream cut short by the torrent. This way! Winta had found a narrow ledge pathway, barely wide enough for horses. They followed single file, the floodwaters rising with terrifying speed below them. Debris-filled water clawed at their horses' hooves. Elena's mount stumbled. For a heart-stopping moment, she felt herself sliding toward the maelstrom. Then Jack's strong hand caught her arm, hauling her back into the saddle. "Hold on." They climbed, fighting wind and rain and terror. The ledge widened into a natural shelf about 30 feet above the canyon floor. They collapsed there, horses and humans alike trembling with exhaustion. The flood raged below, transforming the peaceful canyon into a death trap. Through the rain, Elena saw Hale and his remaining man on the opposite wall, also trapped by the waters. The gunman's face was pale, his usual cold control cracked by primal fear. "Tom," Elena gasped, "did anyone see—" "There," Jack pointed. Miraculously, Tom Brennan clung to a partially submerged cottonwood, the tree bending under the water's assault. He wouldn't last long. Without hesitation, Jack began uncoiling his lariat. The distance was extreme, the wind howling, but his hands were steady. "Winter, hold my horse. Elena, anchor me." She grabbed his belt as he leaned out over the edge. His first throw fell short, snatched away by the wind. The tree bent further. Tom's grip was failing. Jack coiled the rope again, movements economical despite the urgency. Elena pressed against his back, keeping him stable on the slick rock. She could feel his concentration, the way every muscle focused on this one task. The second throw was perfect. The loop settled over Tom's shoulders just as the tree gave way. Jack braced as the weight hit, Elena adding her strength to his. Together they hauled Tom through the churning water to the ledge. The man collapsed, coughing water. "Thought I was done for." "Easy," Elena soothed, checking him for injuries, bruised and battered, but alive. Across the canyon, Haley watched their rescue with an unreadable expression. The flood still raged between them, making any confrontation impossible. As Elena met his gaze through the rain, she noticed something that made her blood run cold. Haley was wearing earrings, silver eagles clutching arrows, just like Manuel's. "Jack," she whispered, but he'd seen it too. For a long moment, Hunter and Hunted stared at each other across the watery divide. Then Hale touched his hat brim in mock salute and turned his horse up the trail, disappearing into the storm with his surviving man. They waited 2 hours for the waters to recede, huddled under Isaiah's canvas tarp. Winter built a small fire from dry wood she'd somehow kept protected, and they dried out as best they could. The evidence they'd collected was safe, wrapped in oilcloth, but Elena barely thought about it. "Those earrings," she said quietly to Jack. "He was wearing Manuel's earrings." "I saw." Jack's voice was grim, bold as brass, like he wanted you to know. Why reveal himself? Jack stared into the fire. "Man like Hale, he's proud of his work, probably been eating at him that he couldn't take credit. Now he knows, and he figures it doesn't matter because he plans to finish what he started." Tom, wrapped in a borrowed blanket, spoke up. "We could take this to the sheriff." "Sheriff's in Pike's pocket," Winter said matter-of-factly. "Everyone knows." "Then we stick to the plan," Jack decided. "Get to Judge Morrison and Prescott. But now we've got more than ledgers and blast marks. We've got attempted murder in front of witnesses and evidence linking Hale to Manuel's death." The journey back to Drywater was subdued. The storm had passed, leaving the desert washed clean and smelling of sage and creosote. But Elena couldn't shake the image of Hale's knowing smile, the casual way he wore her husband's treasured earrings. They reached town after dark, splitting up to avoid attention. Elena went to her room above the saloon while Jack saw to the horses, but when she opened her door, May Delaney was waiting. "Honey, we got trouble," May said without preamble. "Pike's called a town meeting for tomorrow. Says he's got evidence you and that cowboy are stirring up the natives, planning to destroy the railroad." Elena sank onto the bed. "He's turning it around, making us the threat." "That's not the worst of it." May's weathered face was grave. He's put a bounty on Jack, $500 for disrupting commerce. Every two-bit gun hand in the territory will be coming for him. A knock interrupted them. Jack entered, and Elena could see from his expression that he'd already heard. "I'll leave tonight," he said. "Draw them off. Give you time to—" "No." Elena stood, surprising herself with the vehemence of her refusal. "We're in this together. You run now. Pike wins." "Elena, be practical. I'm no good to you dead." "And I'm no good alone." She softened her tone. "Jack, they killed Manuel when he tried to stand up by himself. I won't make that mistake." May looked between them, a knowing glint in her eye. "Well then, if you're both determined to be fools, we'd better be smart fools. I've got friends in the telegraph office. We can wire Judge Morrison, ask him to send federal marshals." "That'll take weeks," Jack pointed out. "Then we'd better survive for weeks." May headed for the door. "I'll spread word among the decent folks. Pike's not the only one who can call meetings. Time people heard the truth." After she left, Jack and Elena sat in silence, the weight of what they faced pressed down like the storm clouds had earlier. In the canyon, Elena said finally, "When I was falling, thank you." Jack's smile was rueful. "Couldn't let Pike's flood succeed where nature's failed." "Is that the only reason?" The question hung between them, delicate as spun glass. Jack studied his hands, choosing his words carefully. "Been a long time since I cared what happened to anyone besides myself and my horses," he admitted. "After the war, it seemed safer that way. No connections, no complications, just drift. And now," he met her eyes, "now I'm thinking maybe a man who stands for nothing might as well be nothing. Your husband, he stood for something, died for it. That takes courage I'd forgotten existed." "Manuel was brave," Elena agreed. "But he was also alone. He thought he could change things by himself, through proper channels and careful documentation. He didn't understand that men like Pike don't play by rules." "So what do we do?" Elena retrieved the ledger from its hiding place, running her fingers over Manuel's neat handwriting. "We fight, but we fight together. All of us, you, me, May, Isaiah, Tom, Winter, everyone who's tired of being afraid. Pike's power comes from isolation, keeping people separated and scared, so we unite them." Jack nodded slowly. "The town meeting. We turn it around on him." "Exactly. Let him make his accusations. Then we present our evidence, in public, where he can't silence us without showing his true face." It was a desperate plan, but it was what they had. Jack stood to leave, then paused at the door. "Elena, for what it's worth, I think Manuel would be proud of what you're doing." "I hope so," she whispered. "I really hope so." That night, Elena lay awake listening to the sounds of the saloon below, somewhere out there. Hale was planning their deaths, wearing her husband's earrings like trophies. Pike was marshaling his forces, ready to crush any resistance. But for the first time since Manuel's funeral, Elena didn't feel alone. Through her window, she could see Jack's campfire outside town, keeping watch. Tomorrow would bring whatever it brought. Tonight, she had allies. The desert wind sang through the empty places, carrying whispers of change. In Drywater, the dust was about to settle in ways Silas Pike never expected. The rains came again that night, but this time they brought no relief. The drops hammered on the tin roof of May's saloon like bullets, and by dawn the usually dry arroyos were running brown with runoff. Jack stood at the edge of town, watching the water race through channels that had been dust just hours before. "Never seen it rain twice in 1 week," Isaiah Brooks said, limping up beside him. "Not natural for these parts." Jack studied the sky, still heavy with clouds. "Nothing natural about any of this. Pike's called his meeting for noon. Half the town's scared to show. Other half's ready to string us up for that bounty. Some are ready to listen," Isaiah corrected. More than you might think. May's been working all night, talking to folks, the Washingtons, the Brennans, even some of the railroad workers. They're tired of Pike bleeding them dry. Before Jack could respond, a rider appeared through the rain winter, pushing her paint pony hard. She pulled up in a spray of mud. "The railroad camp at Red Notch," she gasped. "The canyon where we were yesterday. Water rising fast, workers trapped." Jack's blood ran cold. Red Notch Canyon was a death trap in flash flood conditions, and Pike had placed a work camp right at its mouth, despite warnings from locals who knew the danger. "How many?" he asked. 30, maybe 40. Families, too. Children." Winter's usually stoic face showed real fear. "The foreman won't evacuate. Says, Mister, Pike's orders are to keep working." Jack was already moving toward his horse. "Isaiah, get rope, all you can find. Tools for digging. We'll need every hand we can get." "The meeting," Isaiah started. "To hell with the meeting. People are dying." Elena appeared from the saloon. Having heard the commotion, rain had already soaked through her shawl. "I'm coming with you." "Elena, no, it's too dangerous." "Those are my students' families." Her chin lifted in that stubborn way he'd come to recognize. "I'm coming." There was no time to argue. Within minutes, they'd assembled a rescue party. Jack, Elena, Isaiah, Tom Brennan, Doc Lee, and Winter. Even May closed the saloon to help, loading her wagon with blankets and medical supplies. The ride to Red Notch was a nightmare of mud and rising water. The rain had transformed every low spot into a pond, every gully into a torrent. Jack's mare struggled through belly-deep streams that hadn't existed the day before. They heard the roar before they saw it. The canyon mouth opened before them like a giant's throat. Vomiting brown water filled with debris. The work camp, a collection of tents and shacks, sat on what had seemed like safe ground, but was now an island shrinking by the minute. "Dear God," Elena breathed. Workers stood on roofs and clung to the few scraggly trees. Women held children above the waterline. The current was too strong for swimming, and the water was rising fast. "We need a rope line," Jack shouted over the roar. "Isaiah, Tom anchor points on both banks. Doc, May set up on high ground for the injured. Elena, Winter, help me with the rope." They worked with desperate efficiency. Jack tied one end around his waist and plunged into the current, fighting toward the nearest stranded group. The water was shockingly cold, filled with branches and debris that battered him like clubs. Twice he went under, and twice he fought back to the surface. He reached a partially collapsed tent where a Mexican family clung to the center pole. 3 children, wide-eyed with terror. Jack got the rope around them, signaling for the others to pull. "You first," he told the mother. "No, my babies. Trust me, I'll get them all." One by one, they ferried people across the rope line. Jack lost count of the trips, his muscles screaming, his hands raw from the rope. Elena worked beside him, her skirts tied up, helping children grip the line, speaking calm words in Spanish and English. Through the chaos, Jack noticed who was helping and who wasn't. Pike's men sat on the canyon rim, watching but not lifting a finger. The foreman, a brutal man named Garrett, actually tried to stop workers from abandoning their tools. "Mister, Pike will dock your pay," Garrett shouted. "Get back to work." Tom Brennan solved that problem with a right cross that laid Garrett out cold. The water kept rising. A tent with 2 Chinese workers washed away before they could reach it. The men's screams swallowed by the flood. Jack dove after them but found only churning darkness. "Jack!" Elena grabbed him as he surfaced, gasping. "You can't save everyone." But he tried. They all did. For 3 hours they fought the water, pulling people to safety, losing some, saving more. Isaiah worked until his bad leg gave out completely. Doc Lee treated injuries with steady hands despite the chaos. Even Winter, youngest of them all, showed courage beyond her years. Then came the moment that changed everything. A small girl, maybe 6 years old, was trapped on a wagon that was breaking apart. The water had risen too high, the current too strong for the rope line. Everyone could see she had minutes, maybe less. Jack prepared to go anyway, but Elena caught his arm. "You'll die. The current's too strong now." He looked at her rain-soaked face, saw his own desperation reflected there. "I have to try." "No." She gripped tighter. "Jack, no, please." The please almost broke him. But then Deacon Hale appeared on the opposite bank, and everything shifted. Hale sat his horse calmly, watching the girl's plight with detached interest. He was close enough to help, had rope coiled on his saddle, but he made no move. "Hale!" Jack roared. "Throw your rope!" Hale touched his hat brim. "Not my problem. Cowboy, I work for Mr. Pike, not these folks." The wagon shifted. The girl screamed. That's when Elena did something that took Jack's breath away. She walked to where Garrett lay groaning, pulled his pistol, and aimed it at Hale. "Throw the rope," she said, her voice carrying despite the flood's roar. "Now!" Hale's hand went to his gun, but Elena held steady. "You're fast, Mr. Hale, but not fast enough to outdraw a pulled gun. The rope, now!" For a long moment, they faced off across the raging water. Then, perhaps seeing the steel in Elena's eyes, the same steel that had helped her survive her husband's murder, Hale slowly uncoiled his rope and tossed it to the wagon. Jack and Tom hauled the girl to safety just as the wagon disintegrated. The rescue continued until the last worker was safe. The final count was heartbreaking: 31 saved, 7 lost to the waters. As the flood finally began to recede, the survivors huddled on high ground, wrapped in maize blankets, sipping hot coffee Doc Lee had somehow managed to brew. Pike arrived as they were loading the injured into wagons. He sat his expensive horse, surrounded by gunmen, surveying the destruction of his work camp with cold fury. "You had no authority to interfere with my operation," he said, addressing Jack. "These workers abandoned their posts. They'll forfeit their pay." A murmur of outrage rippled through the rescued workers. Jack stepped forward, mud-caked and exhausted. "Your operation," he gestured at the devastation. "You put these people in a known flood zone. 7 dead because you wouldn't listen to local knowledge. That's murder. Pike. That's business. They knew the risks." "Did they?" Elena emerged from the crowd, still holding Garrett's pistol. "Did you tell them this canyon floods? Did you mention the 3 previous camps washed away here, or did you just promise them work and water?" Knowing they had no choice but to accept. Pike's eyes narrowed. "Arrest this woman. She threatened one of my men with a firearm." "In order to save a child's life," Doc Lee said quietly. "I witnessed it, as did 30 others." "Grateful witnesses," May added. "Funny how that works." The crowd of workers pressed closer, their face hard with anger and loss. Pike's gunmen shifted nervously. Even with weapons, they were outnumbered 3 to 1 by people who just lost everything. Jack sensed the moment balanced on a knife's edge. One wrong word and there'd be bloodshed. "The town meeting," he said loudly. "Noon, you said, well, Mr. Pike, looks like the whole town's here now. Why don't we have that discussion about who's really threatening dry water?" Pike's face darkened. "This isn't over, Callahan." "No," Jack agreed. "It's just beginning." Pike wheeled his horse and rode off, his men trailing. Hale was the last to go, but not before locking eyes with Elena. He touched his ear where Manuel's silver eagle gleamed, a silent promise of violence to come. The journey back to town was somber, but somehow hopeful. The rescued workers walked together, sharing what little they had. Barriers of language and race seemed less important after facing death together. "You realize what you've done?" May asked Jack quietly. "Pike can't let this stand. He'll come at you with everything." "Let him come." Jack was watching Elena comfort a young mother who had lost her husband in the flood. Some things are worth the risk. Isaiah, riding in May's wagon to rest his leg, overheard. That's not the Jack Callahan I knew in the war. That man just wanted to survive and go home. Maybe I've finally figured out what home means, Jack replied. They reached Drywater to find the town transformed. News of the rescue had spread. People lined the streets, not Pike's people, but regular folks, shopkeepers, craftsmen, mothers, workers. They'd seen what happened when profit mattered more than lives, and they'd seen who stepped up to help. The official meeting was forgotten. Instead, an impromptu gathering formed outside the church. Tom Brennan stood on a crate, still muddy from the rescue, and told the crowd exactly why Pike had put that camp in a flood zone cheaper than safe ground, and dead workers could be replaced easily enough. But not anymore. Tom declared, "We've seen his true face, and we've seen heroes today, real heroes who risked their lives while Pike's men watched and did nothing." The crowd roared approval. Jack tried to fade back, uncomfortable with the attention, but Elena caught his hand. "They need to see you," she said softly. "All of us, together." So they stood together, cowboy and schoolteacher, former slave and Chinese doctor, saloon keeper and native guide, while the town found its voice. Pike had one card left to play. Sheriff Watson appeared with a warrant for Jack's arrest on charges of inciting a riot and theft of water. But when he tried to serve it, the crowd closed ranks. "You'll have to go through all of us," May declared. Watson looked at the faces surrounding him, people he'd known for years, now united in purpose, and slowly tore up the warrant. "I'm done being Pike's dog," he said simply, unpinning his badge. As the sun set, painting the wet streets gold, Elena found Jack standing alone by the corrals. The adrenaline had worn off, leaving him exhausted and thoughtful. "We did something today," she said. "We did something," he agreed. "Question is, can we finish it?" Elena pulled Manuel's ledger from her satchel, still safe in its oilcloth. "With this, with the witnesses, with what happened today, yes. But Jack, it's going to get worse before it gets better. Pike won't give up. Neither will we." He turned to face her. "Elena, when you held that gun on Hale, that was the bravest thing I've ever seen." "I was terrified," she admitted. "But that little girl, I kept thinking about my students, about all the children Pike's greed has hurt. Someone had to act." "Someone did." Jack reached out, brushing a strand of wet hair from her face. "You did." The moment stretched between them, fragile as rain-washed air. Then shouts from the street broke the spell. More workers were arriving, fleeing other camps as news of the flood spread. Drywater was about to be overwhelmed with refugees. "We need to organize shelters," Elena said, already thinking ahead. "Food, water, medical care." "We'll handle it," Jack assured her. "Together." As they walked back toward town, Elena slipped her hand into his. It was a small gesture, barely noticeable in the gathering darkness, but it felt like a promise. Behind them, the setting sun turned the flood-scoured canyon red as blood. The water had receded, but its mark remained on the land, on the people, on everything Pike had built on a foundation of fear and greed. Change had come to Drywater, washing away more than just work camps. And in the morning, the real fight would begin. Isaiah Brooks worked despite the pain in his leg, teaching flood survivors how to forge hooks and pulleys from scrap metal. The smithy had become a hub of activity, with people lined up to learn skills that might help rebuild what the water had taken. "Keep the heat even," he instructed a young Chinese worker. "Metal's like a person treated rough. It breaks. Show patience. It bends to your will." Elena watched from the doorway, marveling at how quickly the community had organized. 3 days since the flood, and already they'd established communal kitchens, temporary shelters, even a makeshift school for displaced children. Jack had been instrumental, coordinating with a natural leadership that surprised even him. "Mrs. Morales," Doc Lee appeared at her elbow, his herb basket fragrant with desert sage. The Cameron boy's fever broke. Your teaching him to read during his illness helped more than my medicines, I think. We all do what we can, Elena replied, though the praise warmed her. Indeed, which is why I must show you something. Lee glanced around carefully, privately. They walked to his herb shop, a narrow building squeezed between the barber and the undertaker. Inside, drying plants hung from every beam, filling the air with medicinal scents. Lee moved to a cabinet and withdrew a familiar object. One of my patients brought this, he said, placing a silver earring on the counter. Found it near the old Paiute Springs, half buried in blast debris. He thought it might be valuable. Elena's heart raced. Another eagle earring, identical to Manuel's. Where exactly? Near the fourth spring, the sacred one, the one destroyed last summer. Lee's dark eyes were knowing. The same night your husband died. Elena gripped the counter. Hale was there. He set the charges that destroyed the spring, then came back to town and she couldn't finish. Killed the man who could expose him. Lee completed gently. Mrs. Morales, this is evidence. With what you already have. A commotion outside cut him short. Through the window, Elena saw riders approaching Pike's men, armed and moving with purpose. But instead of heading for the main street, they veered toward the church. The children, Elena ran, Lee close behind. She arrived to find Hale and 6 gunmen surrounding the makeshift classroom. 20 children huddled inside, Winta standing protectively before them. Just a safety inspection, Hale said smoothly. Mr. Pike is concerned about structural damage after the floods. Wouldn't want the roof falling on these precious little ones. The church is sound. Father O'Rourke protested, but one of Pike's men shoved him aside. Elena pushed forward. You have no authority here. Actually, I do. Hale produced a paper. Emergency powers granted by the territorial governor. In times of disaster, Mr. Pike's commission can inspect any building for public safety. It was legal theft, plain and simple. Elena knew they were looking for the ledger, using the children as leverage. Then inspect, she said coldly. But the children stay with me. Hale smiled. Of course, though accidents happen during inspections, boards fall, nails come loose. He picked up a hammer from Isaiah's repair supplies, testing its weight. Dangerous work. The threat was clear. Elena's mind raced. The ledger was hidden beneath the floorboards of her old room. But if they started tearing up floors... What you looking for? Hale? Jack's voice came from behind. He stood in the doorway, relaxed but ready. Tom Brennan flanked him on one side, Isaiah on the other, still carrying his forge hammer. Structural weaknesses, Hale replied, not missing a beat. Mr. Pike takes public safety seriously. Funny thing about structures, Isaiah said, his deep voice carrying, they're strongest when the whole community supports them. As if on cue, people began gathering, flood survivors, townspeople, workers. They came quietly but steadily, surrounding the church. No one spoke, but the message was clear. Hale's men shifted nervously. They were outnumbered 10-1. Inspect away, Jack said. We'll all watch, for safety. For a long moment, violence trembled in the air. Then Hale laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Another time. He tossed the hammer aside, nearly hitting little Gabriel. But soon, Callahan, real soon. After they left, Elena's legs nearly buckled. Jack steadied her, his touch grounding her in the moment. We can't keep playing defense, he said quietly. Time to take the fight to them. That night, they held a war council in May's back room. The core group had expanded besides Jack, Elena, May, Isaiah, and Doc Lee. They now had Tom Brennan, Winta, 3 railroad workers, and, surprisingly, former Sheriff Watson. Pike's getting desperate, Watson said. He looked older without his badge, but somehow more at ease. Word is he's bringing in professional guns from Tucson. The Baxter brothers. Maybe worse. We need to get the evidence to Judge Morrison. Elena insisted. Before Pike silences everyone who could testify. Prescott is 4 days' ride through hostile territory, Tom pointed out. Pike will have men watching every trail. Not every trail, Winta spoke up. Old paths through the mountains, Paiute trading routes. I could guide a small party. Too dangerous, Jack said immediately. Everything's dangerous now, Winta replied with teenage stubbornness. At least this dangerous gets us somewhere. May leaned forward. There's another problem. Even if you reach Morrison, you need witnesses, live ones. Pike's got a long reach. Then we protect the witnesses, Elena said. Bring them together. Keep them safe. Where Pike owns or controls every building big enough, Watson stopped, eyes widening. Except one. The mission ruins, Isaiah breathed. Of course. 5 miles outside town stood the remains of an old Spanish mission, abandoned for decades but still solid. More importantly, it sat on church land, outside Pike's jurisdiction. Defensible position, Jack mused. Water from the old well, thick walls, clear lines of sight. We move everyone there, workers, families, witnesses. Make our stand. You're talking about a siege, Watson warned. I'm talking about survival, Jack countered. Long enough to get word to federal authorities. Elena felt a flutter of hope. It could work, but we'd need supplies, weapons. Leave that to me. May interrupted. I've been in this business long enough to know where everything's hidden in this town, including Pike's private armory. The meeting broke up with assigned tasks. As the others filed out, Elena caught Jack's arm. Earlier, with Hale. Thank you. He covered her hand with his, We're past thanks. Elena, we're in this together. Together, she repeated, tasting the word. It felt like a promise, precious as water in the desert. The evacuation began before dawn. In small groups, families slipped out of dry water toward the mission. Winta and her people scouted ahead, watching for Pike's patrols. By midday, nearly 100 souls had made the journey. The mission was a revelation. Despite decades of abandonment, the main structure stood firm. Isaiah immediately set up a forge in the old blacksmith shop. Doc Lee established an infirmary in what had been the monks' quarters. May organized the kitchen with military efficiency. Home sweet fortress, Tom Brennan said, surveying their domain. Jack organized defenses, placing lookouts and planning escape routes. But his real focus was on Elena, who'd thrown herself into creating a school for the children, maintaining normalcy amid chaos. You need rest, he told her that evening, finding her still teaching by lamplight. The children need routine, she replied, though exhaustion shadowed her eyes. Structure helps them feel safe. And what helps you feel safe? She looked up at him, and something shifted in her expression. You do. The admission hung between them, honest and vulnerable. Jack knelt beside her desk, taking her ink-stained hands. Elena, when this is over, don't, she placed a finger on his lips. Don't make promises about after. We don't know what after looks like. Just be here now, with me. He kissed her then, soft and careful, mindful of the children sleeping nearby. It tasted of hope and fear and something deeper than both. They were interrupted by a shout from the walls, riders approaching a dozen men with Hale at their head. The siege was beginning. Hale stopped just outside rifle range. Quite the gathering. Callahan, playing Moses. Are we leading your people to the promised land? Jack stood on the wall, making himself a target to draw attention from the others. Just folks looking out for each other. Hale, you wouldn't understand. Oh, I understand plenty. I understand Pike owns the water rights. These people work for him. They're theft of property. People aren't property, Elena called out, joining Jack. Not anymore. Or didn't you get word war's been over near 15 years? Hale's face darkened. Everything's property if you got the right papers. Senora, your husband learned that the hard way. The cruelty of it took Elena's breath. Jack felt her tense beside him. Speaking of property, Hale continued, that ledger you stole belongs to Mr. Pike. Return it, and maybe we work something out. The ledger belongs to the law, Elena replied, her voice steady despite her anger. And soon, so will you. Hale laughed. The law out here, lady. The law is what Mr. Pike says it is. Not anymore, Jack said quietly. Things change. People change. Even the desert changes, given enough rain. Poetic, but poetry doesn't stop bullets. Hale wheeled his horse. You got 3 days, Callahan. After that, we come in and take what's ours. Anyone stands in the way. He shrugged. Well, the desert's full of unmarked graves. After they left, the mission erupted in nervous chatter. Some wanted to flee, others to fight immediately. Jack raised his hands for quiet. 3 days is what we need, he announced. Winter, can you get to Prescott and back in that time? The girl nodded confidently. Then we send riders tonight. The ledger, the evidence, statements from witnesses. Everything Judge Morrison needs. And if Hale attacks before they return, Watson asked. Jack's smile was grim. Then we hold. We've got walls, weapons, and something Pike's money can't buy people fighting for their homes, their families, their future. Elena stepped forward. Jack's right. We've come too far to quit now. Manuel died trying to stop Pike. So did those 7 in the flood. We honor them by seeing this through. The crowd's mood shifted, fear transforming into determination. They had 3 days to prepare for war or peace, and they'd use every minute. That night, as Winter and 2 volunteers slipped away with the evidence, Elena found Jack standing watch on the eastern wall. Can't sleep either, she asked. Too much spinning in my head. He made room for her on the parapet. You know, I spent years after the war just drifting, no purpose, no connections, easier that way. And now? He gestured at the mission below, where fires dotted the courtyard and families huddled together. Now I've got 100 reasons to stand and fight, and one in particular. He took her hand. Elena, I need you to know if something happens. Nothing will happen, she said fiercely. We're going to win. Pike and Hale will face justice. And after, she squeezed his fingers. After, we'll have time for all the words we're not saying now. They sat in comfortable silence, hands linked, watching the stars wheel overhead. In the desert, a coyote called, answered by another. Life persisting despite everything. My husband was a good man, Elena said suddenly. But he was careful, cautious. He believed in working within the system, following rules. She turned to Jack. You're teaching me sometimes the rules need breaking. Sometimes careful isn't enough. And you're teaching me that breaking rules means nothing if you're doing it alone. Jack replied. That connection I was avoiding turns out it's the only thing worth fighting for. A shooting star blazed across the sky, and Elena made a wish she didn't speak aloud. 3 days. They just needed 3 days. In the mission below, people prepared for siege or salvation, united by hope and determination. The community that had begun with a simple act of sharing water had grown into something Pike never expected, a force that couldn't be bought, bullied, or broken. The real test was coming, but for tonight, under the vast desert sky, they had each other, and sometimes that was enough. The storm struck on the second night, as if the sky itself had chosen sides. Lightning split the darkness while thunder shook the old mission walls. The children Elena was escorting to the safe camp huddled closer as rain began to fall in sheets. Just a little farther, she encouraged them, though she could barely see the trail herself. They'd left the mission after receiving word that Pike's men were planning to target the family still in town. Jack had wanted to send more guards, but they couldn't spare them.
Mrs. Morales.
Young Gabriel tugged her sleeve.
They're a light.
Through the rain, Elena glimpsed a building, an old horse barn, abandoned but still standing.
Inside, quickly.
They stumbled through the doorway into musty darkness. Elena fumbled with matches, finally getting a lantern lit. The barn was empty save for old straw and broken equipment, but it was dry. We'll wait here until the storm passes, she decided, helping the younger children settle into the straw. That's when she herded horses, moving fast despite the weather. Elena doused the lantern immediately, gathering the children close.
Stay quiet,
she whispered.
Not a sound.
The door crashed open. Lightning illuminated Deacon Hale's pale face, water streaming from his hat. Behind him, 2 more riders crowded in.
Nothing,
one complained. Trails washed out. They're here somewhere, Hale insisted. The Mexican teacher and her brats. Pike wants them for leverage. Elena pressed deeper into the shadows, her hand over little Maria's mouth. The girl was trembling with fear. Check the loft, Hale ordered. Footsteps on the ladder. Elena's heart hammered so loud she was sure they'd hear it. Then hoofbeats outside, many horses approaching fast. Boss, a 4th rider burst in. Callahan's coming. Saw our tracks. Hale cursed viciously.
How many?
Just him, but riding hard. Elena felt a mixture of hope and terror. Jack alone against 4 gunmen. Perfect, Hale said softly. Take positions. When he walks through that door. The door exploded inward before he could finish. Jack rolled through, gun already firing. His first shot took the man on the ladder. The second sent another diving for cover.
Elena,
Jack shouted.
Down!
She flattened herself over the children as the barn erupted in gunfire. Splinters flew from wooden beams, the air filled with smoke and the sharp smell of gunpowder. Through the chaos, she heard Jack moving, using the darkness and storm to his advantage. A man screamed, another cursed. Then sudden silence except for the rain. Jack, Elena called shakily.
Here.
He emerged from behind an overturned wagon, favoring his left arm.
You hurt?
No, she gasped, seeing blood on his shirt. You're shot. Scratched. Where's Hale? They both realized it at once. In the confusion, Hale had vanished. Jack quickly checked the other men, 1 dead, 2 wounded, and no threat. He bound his arm with practiced efficiency. We need to move, he said. Hale will bring reinforcements. But Elena was already at his side, examining the wound by touch. This is more than a scratch. You're losing blood. I've had worse. He cupped her face with his good hand. Elena, I need to tell you something. In case... No. She pressed her fingers to his lips.
No last words. Not yet.
He smiled, despite the pain. Stubborn woman. All right, but I need you to know... Lightning flashed, showing his eyes clear and certain. I can't promise fancy things, diamond rings or fine houses or silk dresses. But I'll carry you home every night till I die. Through storms, through troubles, through whatever comes. That's all I've got to offer. Elena's eyes filled with tears. Here, in this broken barn with children huddled in straw and enemies closing in, he was offering his heart with the simple honesty that had drawn her from the beginning.
Jack Callahan,
she whispered.
That's worth more than all the fancy things in the world.
She kissed him then, tasting rain and desperation and promise. When they pulled apart, his eyes held something new, not just determination, but joy. The children, he said. We need to get them safe. Working together, they fashioned a travois from wagon parts to carry the smallest ones. Jack's horse stood steady despite the storm, and they loaded everyone carefully. The wounded gunmen they tied up and left someone would find them eventually. The journey back to the mission was a nightmare of mud and wind, and Jack swaying in his saddle. Elena rode beside him, one hand on his good arm, ready to catch him if he fell.
"Talk to me," she urged. "Stay awake."
"I remember, first day," he mumbled.
"You standing up to Pike's men? Thought
Bravest thing I'd seen.
you gave water to children. That was brave."
"No, that was just right. You made me remember the difference." They reached the mission as dawn broke pale through the dissipating clouds. Isaiah took one look at Jack and started barking orders. Within minutes, they had him on Doc Lee's operating table.
"Bullet still in there,"
Lee reported after examination.
"Close to the bone. This will be delicate." "Do it,"
Jack gritted out. "Elena."
"I'm staying."
She gripped his hand.
"Together. Remember."
The surgery seemed to last forever. Elena held Jack steady while Lee worked, Isaiah assisting. May kept the children distracted with stories and hot chocolate. Through it all, Elena whispered encouragement, promises, prayers, anything to keep Jack anchored. Finally, Lee dropped a bloody bullet into a tin dish.
"Got it. His lucky inch to the right would have shattered the bone."
Jack was unconscious by then, pale but breathing steady. They moved him to a bed where Elena maintained her vigil. She dozed fitfully in a chair, waking whenever he stirred. Near sunset, his eyes opened. "Elena."
"Here."
She squeezed his fingers.
"Always here."
"The children."
"Safe, all of them."
She smoothed his hair back.
"You saved us."
"We saved each other." He struggled to sit up. "How long was I out, Haley?"
"Shh."
She eased him back down.
"Isaiah doubled the guards. We're safe for now."
"For now." His face was grim. "Tomorrow's the third day. Pike will come." As if summoned by his words, Tom Brennan burst in. "Riders coming! Must be 50 of them!" Elena's heart sank. Even with their preparations, 50 gunmen. "Wait," Tom added.
"They're carrying a white flag."
From the walls, they watched Pike's army approach. The man himself rode at the center, Hale beside him. They stopped just within shouting distance. "Callahan," Pike's voice carried clearly. "Let's talk terms." Jack insisted on going to the wall despite his wound. Elena and Isaiah supported him on either side.
"Nothing to talk about.
Pike," Jack called back. "We've sent evidence to Judge Morrison. It's over." "Is it?" Pike smiled coldly. "Your riders never made it through the pass. Seems they met with an unfortunate accident." Elena felt Jack sag against her. If Winter and the others were dead, if the evidence was lost.
"You're lying,"
she shouted. "Am I?" Pike produced a familiar bag, the one containing the ledger. "Face facts. You've lost, but I'm feeling generous. Everyone leaves the mission now, goes back to work, and I'll forget this rebellion. Stay and..." He shrugged. "Well, the desert's hungry this time of year." Murmurs of fear rippled through the defenders. Some had families, children, the thought of massacre. "You've got 1 hour to decide." Pike finished. "After that, we settle this the hard way." As they retreated, Elena felt despair crushing her chest. They'd come so far, endured so much, only to fail at the last moment. "He's lying," Jack said quietly.
"Has to be."
"And if he's not?" Jack straightened despite the pain.
"Then we make our stand anyway. Some things are worth dying for."
"And living for," Elena added softly. They gathered everyone in the mission courtyard. The mood was dark, fearful. Some openly advocated surrender.
"My children," a woman cried. "I can't let them die for this."
"They'll die anyway." Tom Brennan countered. "You think Pike forgives you, think he forgets? We go back now. We're all dead within a month. Just quiet-like, where no one sees."
"At least we'd have time."
"Time for what?" Elena stepped forward. Time to watch Pike destroy more families. Time to see our children grow up as slaves to his greed. I've had time since my husband died. Time to be afraid. Time to hide. I'm done with that kind of time." She looked around the courtyard, meeting eyes. "Yes, we might die tonight, but we die standing up, together, for something that matters. Or we live on our knees, apart, for nothing at all. I know which my Manuel would choose. I know which I choose." "Pretty words," someone muttered. "But words don't stop bullets." "No," Jack agreed, leaning heavily on his rifle. "But courage does, and truth, and community. We've built something here Pike can't understand, people caring for each other across all lines. That's why he's so desperate to destroy it." May Delaney stepped up. "I've lived in Drywater 20 years, seen it go from hopeful to hopeless. These past weeks, working with all of you, I've seen hope again. That's worth fighting for." One by one, others spoke. Isaiah about dignity, Dockley about compassion, even young Winter's cousin, speaking for those still on the trail, about homeland and justice. The fear remained, but something else grew alongside it, resolve. "All right then," Jack said finally. "We hold. Isaiah, ammunition check. Tom, shore up the weak points. Doc, prepare for wounded. Everyone else." "Riders," the lookout's cry interrupted. "From the east, moving fast!" Pike's hour wasn't up. Was he attacking early? But these riders bore no white flag. They wore federal badges and rode with purpose. At their head, Judge Morrison, Elena breathed. The federal judge, accompanied by a dozen marshals, swept past Pike's startled army and right up to the mission gates. "Mrs. Morales," Morrison called. "I understand you have evidence regarding corporate malfeasance and murder." Elena's legs nearly gave out. "But how the riders—" Winter emerged from behind the marshals, grinning. "Took the high trail. Like I said, Paiute paths. Pike's men watched the main pass while we went over the mountain. The rest happened quickly." Morrison examined the ledger, took statements, studied the physical evidence. Pike tried to bluster, to bribe, to threaten, but federal authority carried weight even his money couldn't match. "Silas Pike," Morrison announced formally. "You're under arrest for conspiracy, murder, and violation of federal water rights. Mr. Hale, you're charged with 3 counts of murder and destruction of treaty-protected resources." Hale went for his gun. 5 marshals drew faster. He fell, silver earrings glinting in the dust. Pike's army melted away, mercenaries unwilling to fight federal marshals. Pike himself maintained his arrogance until the shackles clicked shut. "This isn't over," he snarled at Jack. "I've got lawyers, influence." "You've got a date with a judge," Morrison corrected. "And from what I've seen here, probably a rope." As the marshals led Pike away, a strange silence fell over the mission. Then someone Elena never knew who began to clap. Others joined, and soon the courtyard rang with celebration. But Elena only had eyes for Jack, who was smiling at her with that crooked grin she'd come to love. "We did it," she said wonderingly. "You did it," he corrected. "I just tried to keep up." She kissed him there in front of everyone, not caring who saw, when they broke apart. May Delaney was wiping her eyes. "About time," the saloon keeper declared. "Now, who wants whiskey on the house?" As people dispersed to celebrate, Jack pulled Elena aside. "That promise I made in the barn." "I remember every word." "Good, because I meant it. Every word. I know we've been through hell, and there's rebuilding ahead, but Elena—" He took her hands. "Will you let me carry you home tonight and always?" She thought of Manuel, who would want her happy, of the children who needed a father figure, of the community that needed leaders, of her own heart, already given. "Yes," she said simply. "Yes to tonight. Yes to always. Yes to home being wherever we're together." Thunder rumbled in the distance, but this time it brought no fear. The storm had passed, leaving the desert washed clean and ready for new growth. And, in the old mission, under stars beginning to appear, two souls who'd found each other in the crucible of courage began planning a future built on something stronger than fear. Deeper than greed, a love as vast as the desert sky, and as enduring as the mountains that watched over them all. The morning of Pike's relief market dawned bright and deceptively peaceful. The man himself stood on a makeshift platform in the town square, surrounded by tables laden with food, water barrels, and medical supplies. His remaining gunmen formed a protective circle, trying to look charitable rather than threatening. "Citizens of Drywater," Pike's voice boomed across the gathering crowd. "Recent events have caused unfortunate misunderstandings. I'm here to make amends. Free provisions for all flood victims. Fresh water at no charge. Let's put this unpleasantness behind us." Elena watched from May's saloon porch, the ledger secure in her satchel. Jack stood beside her, still favoring his wounded arm, but steady. "He's trying to buy them back," Jack murmured. "Or set a trap," Elena replied. She'd noticed how Pike's men were positioned, blocking every exit from the square. People approached the tables cautiously, desperate need warring with suspicion. Pike smiled benevolently, personally handing out bread to children, playing the generous patron. Mrs. Morales." Father O'Rourke appeared at her elbow. "The people are confused. They don't know what to believe." Elena made her decision. Then it's time they knew the truth. She stepped down from the porch and walked straight toward Pike's platform. Jack followed, as did Isaiah, May, and Doc Lee. The crowd parted, sensing something momentous.
"Ah, Mrs. Morales."
Pike's smile was sharp as glass. "Come to accept my generosity."
"I've come to return your property,"
Elena said clearly, holding up the ledger. Gasps rippled through the crowd. "But first, I think these people deserve to know what's in it." Pike's expression darkened.
"That's stolen property."
"Yes, it is," Elena agreed. "Stolen lives, stolen water, stolen futures. Should I read the entry about the Paiute Springs August 15th payment to D. Hale for removal services? $300 to destroy the water source for 3 native bands." "Lies," Pike snarled. But people were listening now, pressing closer. Elena opened the ledger, her voice carrying clearly. September 2nd, bribe to Federal Inspector Thompson to approve the Red Notch campsite, despite 3 previous floods. October 10th, payment for dynamite to redirect Skeleton Canyon Dam. "Enough," Pike gestured to his men. "Arrest this woman." But the gunmen hesitated. The crowd had swelled. Workers and townspeople and flood survivors forming a living wall around Elena. "Or should I read about my husband?" Elena's voice cracked slightly. "November the 23rd. Problem with accounts clerk resolved. Permanent solution. D. Hale, $500. A woman in the crowd sobbed Mrs. Chen, whose husband had died in a mine accident after questioning missing wages. Others began calling out names of lost loved ones, dates matching entries in the ledger. Hale emerged from behind the platform, and Elena's heart clenched seeing Manuel's silver earrings gleaming in his ears. But she stood firm, even as his hand dropped to his gun. "You want to shoot me, Mr. Hale?" she asked. "Here in front of everyone, add another murder to your tally." "Wouldn't be murder," Hale said softly. "Just putting down a thief and a liar." That's when Jack moved. Despite his wound, he was suddenly between Elena and Hale, his own hand near his Colt. "Try it," Jack said quietly. "Please, I've been waiting for the excuse." The square held its breath, 2 gunmen facing off, but now it meant more than a personal duel. It was the old way against the new, fear against hope. "This is touching," Pike interrupted. "But changes nothing. I own the water rights. I employ half this town. You need me." "No," Elena said, not taking her eyes off Hale. "We need water. We need jobs. We don't need you." She pulled out another paper, a telegram that had arrived that morning. From Judge Morrison in Prescott. Federal marshals will arrive within the week to investigate charges of murder, conspiracy, and violation of water rights. He's very interested in this ledger. Pike's composure finally cracked. You think the law matters? Here I am, the law, Sheriff Watson. Former sheriff, Watson corrected, stepping from the crowd. Resigned my position. These folks deserve better than a bought badge. The crowd surged forward, angry voices rising. Pike's gunmen raised their rifles, but they were vastly outnumbered. Listen, Pike roared. You turn on me, you'll have nothing, no water, no work, no protection. You'll starve. We're already starving, Tom Brennan called out. Least now we know why. The railroad needs labor, someone else shouted. They'll deal with us direct, without your cut. And water, Pike sneered. You going to drink dust? That's when Winter stepped forward, flanked by several Paiute elders. We know where water flows, hidden springs Pike never found. We'll share like we always did before. The revelation rippled through the crowd. Water without Pike's control. Suddenly, his power seemed as insubstantial as smoke. This isn't over, Pike snarled. He signaled to Hale. Clear a path. We're leaving. But Hale wasn't looking at Pike. His pale eyes were fixed on Elena, on the ledger in her hands. Can't let that book reach Prescott, he said conversationally. Too much history in those pages. He drew, fast as thought, faster than Jack's wounded reflexes. But Elena had been expecting it. She threw herself sideways as Hale's gun cleared leather. Manuel's ledger clutched to her chest. The shot was impossibly loud in the packed square. Women screamed. Men dove for cover. But Hale's bullet found only empty air. 3 other guns had spoken in the same instant: Jack's, Isaiah's, and, surprisingly, May Delaney's Derringer from her spot near the platform. Hale stood swaying, looking down at the spreading red on his shirt with something like surprise. The silver earrings caught the morning sun as he toppled backward. In the shocked silence that followed, Pike tried to run. He made it 3 steps before the crowd closed in. Not violently, there had been enough violence. They simply surrounded him, a living barrier between the tyrant and escape. You can't do this, Pike gasped. I have rights. So did Manuel Morales, Elena said quietly. So did the workers who died in the flood. So did the native families who died when you destroyed their water. She opened the ledger one last time. Should I read more names, Mr. Pike? There are so many pages. Pike's shoulders slumped in defeat. By noon, the transformation of dry water had begun. Without Pike's stranglehold, people organized quickly. Tom Brennan met with railroad representatives, negotiating fair wages and safer working conditions. Winter's people began mapping water sources, planning shared access. Doc Lee and Father O'Rourke established a makeshift court in the church, taking formal statements from witnesses. The evidence against Pike grew into a mountain that no amount of lawyers could scale. Elena found herself at the center of it all, coordinating, translating, recording. The skills that had made her a teacher now helped forge a community from fragments of fear and hope. You're a natural leader, May observed, bringing her lunch she'd forgotten to eat. I'm just doing what needs doing, Elena protested. That's what leaders do, honey. As the sun peaked, Jack appeared at her elbow. Walk with me. They strolled to the edge of town, where the desert stretched endless and free. Jack's arm was still bandaged, but his step was sure. Quite a morning, he said. It's not over. The marshals need to arrive. Trials need to happen. It's over enough. He turned to face her. Pike's finished. The town's free. You did that. We did that. He smiled. You going to argue with everything I say for the next 40 years? 40 years, Elena raised an eyebrow. That's presumptuous. Mr. Callahan. Woman? You threw yourself in front of a bullet for a ledger. I figure if you're that committed to evidence,
you might be committed to other things too.
She laughed, surprising herself. After all the tension, laughter felt like rain in the desert.
Jack Callahan, are you proposing while covered in trail dust and blood?
Would you prefer I wait? Get cleaned up, find a ring, do it proper. He stepped closer. Because I will. But Elena, I've waited 10 years to feel alive again. Don't make me wait longer to start living. She thought of Manuel. Who would have liked this direct, honest man? Of the children who already looked at Jack with hero worship. Of the nights ahead, building something new from Pike's ashes. Yes, she said simply. He kissed her there on the edge of everything, with the whole town probably watching from windows and doorways. When they pulled apart, she was laughing again. What?
May's going to be impossible. She's been planning our wedding since the day you faced down Hale at the water station.
Smart woman, May. Jack took her hand, and they started back toward town. Though she might have to wait a bit. We've got a community to build first. Together, Elena agreed. As they walked, people called out from doorways, thanks, congratulations, questions about water distribution and work assignments. The ledger had done its work, revealing truth. Now came the harder task of building trust.
You know what I just realized?
Jack said as they reached the church.
What's that?
I promised to carry you home every night, but we don't have a home yet. Elena squeezed his hand.
We have a whole town that's becoming home?
For everyone. Father O'Rourke met them at the door. Hate to interrupt, but we've got 30 people wanting to file statements, and Doc Lee needs help organizing. We're coming, Elena assured him. As they entered the church, now bustling with purposeful activity, Jack caught her arm. Tonight, he said quietly, when all this settles, let me at least carry you to wherever you're sleeping. Start keeping that promise.
Every night until you die,
she teased. Every night until I die. The simple certainty in his voice made her throat tight. In a world of broken promises and stolen dreams, he offered the one thing that mattered: consistency, presence, the daily choice to show up and stay.
Then you'd better heal fast,
she said. I'm not light, and these stairs to May's rooms are steep. His laughter followed her into the church, where their people waited, where their future sprawled before them like an unwritten page, where the work of freedom began with each small act of courage and care. Outside, clouds gathered on the horizon, more rain coming to the desert, washing away the old, nurturing the new, and in dry water, for the first time in years, people looked forward to the storm. The federal marshals left Drywater after a week, taking Pike in chains to face trial in Prescott. Hale's body lay in the cemetery, unmourned save by the buzzards. But the real work of rebuilding had only just begun. Jack stood waist-deep in the old irrigation channel, clearing decades of debris alongside Tom Brennan and Isaiah Brooks. The sun beat down mercilessly, but the men worked with purpose. Doc Lee and Winta's people had identified a method to restore water flow using the natural springs and a system of community-managed channels. Lift with your legs, not your back, Isaiah advised as they hauled out a massive cottonwood log. We ain't young anymore. Dust. Jack grinned, wiping sweat from his brow. Speak for yourself. I'm feeling younger every day. That's because you got a woman making you breakfast, Tom laughed.
Rest of us are still eating May's questionable stew.
I heard that, May called from the bank, where she supervised water distribution. My stew kept this town alive for 20 years. The easy banter felt like healing. For too long, Drywater had been a place of whispers and fear. Now, laughter came easier. Elena appeared with the school children, each carrying small buckets. Science lesson today, she announced. We're going to learn about irrigation while helping clear the smaller channels. Young Gabriel raised his hand. Mrs. Morales, when you marry Mr. Jack, will we have to call you something different? Heat that had nothing to do with the sun touched Elena's cheeks. We'll discuss that when the time comes. Gabriel, now. Who can tell me why water flows downhill? Jack caught her eye and winked. They'd decided to wait until the town was stable before making their union official. But everyone knew it was coming, including, apparently, the children. As the students scattered along the channels with their buckets, Elena moved to where Jack worked.
How's the arm?
Better every day. He flexed to prove it, though she caught the slight wince.
Doc Lee says another week and I'll be good as new.
And then, he set down his shovel, studying her face. And then I keep my promises. All of them. Before she could respond, a shout went up from downstream. Water. The first trickle of clear spring water was flowing through the restored channel. People gathered, some crying openly as they watched the life-giving stream wind its way toward town. It's not much yet, Winta said, appearing beside them. But with work, we can irrigate enough land for everyone. My people will teach yours the old ways how to read the weather, preserve water, share fairly. That evening, the town council met for the first time. Without Pike's iron control, democracy bloomed tentatively. They elected Tom Brennan as mayor, May as treasurer, and Elena as secretary of education and records. We need laws. Watson, the former sheriff, suggested real ones, fair ones, based on water rights that can't be bought or sold, Elena added, taking notes in her careful hand. Community ownership, with shares based on need, not wealth. They talked late into the night, planning a future that seemed impossible just weeks before. Jack mostly listened, but when he spoke, people paid attention. His quiet authority, earned through action rather than words, carried weight. As the meeting ended, Father O'Rourke pulled Elena and Jack aside. I've had a telegram from Prescott. Pike's trial is set for next month. They'll need witnesses. Elena's hand found Jack's. Returning to testify meant reliving Manuel's death, facing Pike's expensive lawyers. But justice demanded it. We'll be there, Jack said simply. 3 weeks later, they rode out at dawn. Jack, Elena, Tom, and Isaiah. May stayed to run the town, joking that someone had to keep the place from falling apart. The journey to Prescott took 4 days through country that shifted from desert to pine-covered mountains. They camped under stars so bright they seemed touchable. On the third night, while Tom and Isaiah slept, Jack and Elena sat by the dying fire. Nervous about testifying, he asked. Terrified, she admitted. But Manuel deserves justice. All of them do. Jack poked at the embers, sending sparks spiraling upward.
You know, I never thanked you. For what?
For waking me up. I'd been sleepwalking for 10 years, going through motions, avoiding connections. He looked at her across the fire. You changed that. You changed yourself, Elena corrected.
I just gave you a reason.
No. He moved around the fire to sit beside her. You gave me 100 reasons. Every time you stood up to Pike, every time you taught those children, every time you chose hope over fear. Elena leaned into him, feeling his solid warmth.
I was so angry after Manuel died, angry at Pike, at the town, at God. Then you offered water to a thirsting child, and I thought maybe there's still good in this world.
Just water, Jack murmured.
Never just water, not in the desert.
She turned to face him.
Jack, whatever happens in Prescott,
we'll face it together, he finished. That's what we do now. The trial was everything Elena feared and more. Pike's lawyers twisted words, challenged evidence, painted the victims as criminals and troublemakers. But the ledger spoke louder than legal tricks. Manuel's meticulous records, combined with witness testimony, built a wall of truth that couldn't be demolished. Elena testified for 3 hours, voice steady despite Pike's murderous glare. She told of Manuel's integrity, his death, finding the ledger, When Pike's lawyer suggested she'd fabricated evidence for revenge, she simply opened the book and read entry after entry, dates and names and amounts that corroborated everything. Jack testified about the flood, the destroyed camps, Pike's refusal to provide water while children collapsed from thirst. His military bearing and direct answers frustrated attorneys used to intimidation. The verdict came swift guilty on all counts. Pike would hang. As they left the courthouse, Elena felt hollow rather than triumphant. Justice had been served, but it wouldn't bring back the dead. "It's done," Jack said quietly. "Part of it?" Elena agreed. "The rest building something better, that's the real work." They returned to Drywater to find the town transformed. The irrigation channels ran clear. New businesses had opened as word spread that water was available at fair prices. The school had doubled in size. Most surprisingly, a delegation waited at May's saloon representatives from 3 neighboring towns, come to learn about Drywater's water-sharing agreements. "Word spreading," May explained. "How we broke Pike's monopoly. Other towns want to know how we did it." Elena spent the next days drafting documents, creating a template other communities could adapt. The Drywater Accords. They called them principles of shared resource management that prioritized community over profit. Meanwhile, Jack worked on something of his own. He'd claimed a piece of land near the restored springs, not for cattle this time, but for building. With help from Isaiah and others, walls began to rise. "It's not fancy," he told Elena one evening, leading her to see the progress. "But it'll be solid. Room for a family. Garden space. Close enough to town for your teaching. Far enough for some peace." Elena walked through the framed rooms, imagining furniture, curtains, children's laughter. "It's perfect." "There's one more thing." Jack led her behind the house to where a small stream ran, diverted from the main channel. Someone had already begun planting cottonwoods along its banks. "Water rights come with the land. Our share, official and permanent." "Our share," the words made her throat tight. "Jack Callahan, are you asking me to marry you with irrigation rights instead of a ring?" He pulled something from his pocket, a simple silver band. "Isaiah made it. Said I couldn't propose with just water and lumber." Elena laughed through sudden tears. "When?" "Tomorrow. Next week, tonight." He stepped closer. "I have waited long enough. Elena, the house won't be finished for weeks, but May's offered her best room until then. What matters is starting our life together." "Yes," she said, as she'd said so many times before. "Yes to all of it." They married the following Sunday. The whole town attended. Cramming into the church and spilling onto the street, Winta's people brought traditional gifts. The Chinese workers presented silk cloth. The Mexican families cooked enough food for an army. Father O'Rourke performed the ceremony, his voice carrying through the open doors to the crowd outside. When he reached the vows, Jack spoke clear and strong. "I can't promise fancy things, Elena, but I promise to carry you home every night till I die. Through storm and drought, plenty and want, I'll be there." Elena's response came through tears. "I promise to build that home with you, day by day, year by year, to stand beside you as we've stood together, to choose hope over fear, always." When they kissed, the cheer from the crowd probably reached Pike in his cell in Prescott. The celebration lasted until dawn. Music filled the streets, fiddles and guitars and drums creating an unlikely harmony. Jack and Elena danced to everything from Mexican folk songs to Irish reels, the community's diversity becoming its strength. As the sun rose, painting the desert in shades of gold and rose, Jack swept Elena into his arms. "What are you doing?" she laughed. "Keeping my promise, carrying you home." He started toward May's, Elena protesting half-heartedly about propriety and his still-healing arm. "Every night," he said firmly. "I meant it." And he did. Through the years that followed, years that brought children and challenges, droughts and abundance, sorrow and joy, Jack carried Elena home each night, sometimes literally, when she was tired from teaching, sometimes figuratively, when the weight of memory pressed heavy, always faithfully, as constant as the stars over the desert. The house by the spring became a gathering place. Elena's students came to study under the cottonwoods. Town meetings moved to their large kitchen when winter winds blew cold. Children, their own, and others filled the rooms with noise and life. Drywater grew into its name, becoming an oasis of fair dealing and shared prosperity. The accord spread throughout the territory, breaking water monopolies and building communities. Historians would later call it the Drywater Movement, a peaceful revolution that changed the American Southwest. But for Jack and Elena, it was simpler than history. It was keeping promises. It was choosing each other daily. It was building a love that ran deeper than any spring, stronger than any storm, more precious than all the fancy things money could buy. And every night, as promised, he carried her home. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey through the Old West, where love bloomed in the harshest conditions and ordinary people stood up against injustice. If you enjoyed Jack and Elena's story, I'd love to hear from you. Please comment below and let me know where you're listening from. It's amazing to connect with fellow Western romance lovers from around the world. Don't forget to subscribe to Wild West Night for more tales of courage, romance, and adventure from America's frontier. Hit that like button if this story touched your heart, and please consider pressing the hype button to help more people discover this story. Until next time, keep riding toward the sunset, partners.